It's an experience that is hard to describe. And it can happen to any of us. In fact, my hunch is that if you look back at your life, you've had these experiences. These are the experiences that are hard to reason and describe. These are the experiences that make the hairs in your arms stand up. These are the experiences that some might call supernatural. Some might call spiritual experiences. I would say they're the type of mystical experiences, an otherworldly sense of you, of others, of the world. Can you think just for a moment about an experience like that in your life? Now, I know that we're smart people and many educated people, and that we love to get answers to life difficult questions, and that we love to explain things away, and it's all good. And I love that even in our theological life or our life of faith, we should indeed ask questions and we should engage, and all that is wonderful. But there are the other moments. Just last week, we remembered Pentecost, when the Spirit comes down upon the church. Talk about a mystical type of experience. And so in the weeks ahead, we continue our conversation. What does it look like to be a community led by the Spirit? And some of that can indeed be in the way we engage things. For example, the way we engage the Bible matters, right? So we engage it reasonably, yes, and we engage it in a way that helps us use our current experience to help us engage the text and interpret it. All that it's a wonderful thing. But God is still at work in the world. And God is still at work in the world in ways that often we cannot explain, that often make no sense to us, that often we cannot reason our ways out of it. And so it's so pivotal for us to open our minds and our hearts for the possibility of the work of God in new ways, in ways that might seem supernatural, in ways that are indeed mystical. God wasn't just living in these ways or working out in these ways 2,000 years ago or longer. No, God is still at work in that way right here, right now in our world today. And I would say in a world where there's so much heartbreak, so much violence, so much despair, so much hopelessness, it's even more important for us to root ourselves in the possibility that God breaks into history and does things that we cannot even imagine. Doing things, graceful things, loving things, restoring things, God creating and recreating things, God intervening in the world in ways we cannot explain, God empowering us in ways that we couldn't imagine. The prophet today knew this. His people struggling. He himself struggling. And pretty quickly, the vision came to him. A voice comes from heaven, and something happens. And did you notice in the text, something interesting happens? This prophet doesn't rise to heaven or to God's place. No. God comes into the temple, into the day-to-day place of worship of their time. Comes and inhabits it in a real way. Did you see the image that the hem of God's own robe fills the temple? God is so huge and so grand that the hem of his robe, the space of that temple could not contain it. God breaking into history in a miraculous way. And that presence of God does something to the prophet. Reminds the prophet of who he's been called to be. And it could very well be that today we might imagine in this work we're doing together, in this mythical expression of the story, we can imagine God entering our spaces and filling our spaces with grace and love and possibility. And in today's text, the prophet acknowledges that the people are struggling, that he's struggling, and there's a really vivid image of a coal being placed upon the prophet's lips. We can almost hear the sizzling and the pain of that coal into the lips, something visceral and real happening, material happening that changes everything. And so often in our own lives, if we pay attention to the God that's still at work, some amazing things can happen. We being transformed by the presence of God in our lives. If we just open our minds to it, that Spirit called upon down at Pentecost is the Spirit that still at work in us to this day, doing that transformative work. It's a Spirit that connects us to divine life and allows us to see divine life at work in the world. And so I'm wondering today what it would look like for us to facilitate these mystical experiences of God. That sense where time stops and a voice is heard. Sometimes we hear others tell those stories and we think, oh, that happens only to kind of holy people. Or that happens to people that have this higher level. No. If we open our hearts, God's at work in those ways all the time, providing us with that opportunity. So maybe part of what we have to do is as I often tell you on Sunday mornings, to tune our ears to the Spirit that's already here. So this prophet had his mindset in being able to see and hear. You too can tune your ears to see and hear, recovering your sense of awe, recovering your sense of wonder, recovering your sense of curiosity. At times, that requires suspending the classic way in which we kind of Western human beings have been trained to look at things and trying to tear them down and explain them away. No, just pause for a moment. Look at a beautiful sunset. Listen to a beautiful piece of music. Look at a landscape. Observe nature, the birds chirping outside, the flowers blooming, just for a moment. Don't try to explain it. Just observe it and be taken by it. Hold the hands of someone who's dying. Come alongside someone who's struggling, and you're going to be able to see God. Sit for a moment and meditate upon your life, and you might just be able to see God. Open your heart to those possibilities. Right here in 2024, yes, and you'll be amazing what you might find. See, we need that connection to divine life. It is part of what it means to be human. Oh, it's unexplainable. And at times, fantastical, yes, indeed. And yet, God still meets us where we are. And this personal God is at work in our lives, doing amazing things, but also at work in the world. And this God is calling us to being a humanity that's full and abundant and flourishing. This God still breaks into history and empowers us to be at work in the world. So even the work that we do to make the world a better place is a work inspired by that encounter with divine life. It's not just because we're do-gooders in the world. It's because we've experienced something that sometimes we cannot explain away. And that encounter with divine life inspires us into active service, but also comforts us when we need it most. Also softens us when our hearts get hardened. Also companions us when we find ourselves in hopelessness. See, this God, by the power of the Spirit, this God is showing up, calling us, transforming us, and then sending us into the day-to-day of life to be agents of God's activity, of God's love, of God's compassion, of God's justice. So people of God today, slow down just for a moment. The Spirit is speaking. Can you hear it? The Spirit is reaching out. Can you feel it? The Spirit surrounds you. Can you sense it? An invitation is before us for you and for us together as a people, opening the pathway to a God who's breaking us to history over and over again and doing what divine life does for you and for the world. So may you be one this week who points towards the mystery that is God all around you. May you open the pathways to mystical experiences for you and for others, and may you hold to that mystery with awe and wonder and reverence, and may that inspire all of us together, so that all people will experience the goodness, grace, mercy of God. Thanks be to God. Amen.